A man in his 40s walked the muddy trail with his loyal German shepherd beside him. The dog stopped, growling softly, then began to dig beneath an ancient pine. From the wet soil, a rusted compass appeared engraved with the words, "To Dad, love Ben." The man froze, eyes trembling as silence filled the forest. Then the dog hissed sharply, staring into the fog where fresh tire tracks cut through the mud, leading deeper into the woods. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to receive notifications for upcoming stories. May God bless you and guide you toward His light. The morning fog drifted like pale smoke through the pines, soft and slow, carrying the scent of wet moss and cold earth. The forest was quiet, holding its breath, except for the rhythmic sound of boots pressing against the damp ground. Ethan Cole, a man in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered and weathered from years in the Marine Corps, walked with a steady, measured pace. His face bore the faint roughness of stubble, his brown hair streaked with early gray. There was a stillness to him, a man who had learned to move silently, even when no one was listening. Beside him trotted Ash, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a coat of white and deep black, his ears alert, his breath visible in the cold air. The two had become a single rhythm, one step, one breath, one memory between them. Ethan rarely spoke aloud anymore. The world had taken too much from him to waste words on the air. 3 years ago, an accident on Highway 93 had stolen his wife and his son. Since then, he had lived in the radar. The cabin his father once built, hidden among the pine ridges of Silver Creek. People in town said he'd gone half wild, talking to his dog more than to any living soul. He didn't correct them. In truth, Ash was all he needed. Steady, loyal, unjudging. The dog seemed to understand every pause, every silence, every ghost that crossed Ethan's eyes. They walked the same trail each dawn, the same worn path behind the cabin that wound toward the ridge. Ethan said it kept him connected, though to what he wasn't sure. Maybe to the sound of the wind through the needles, or maybe to the faint echo of his son's laughter that sometimes slipped through the fog of memory. Ash trotted ahead, nose to the ground, tail swaying low. The shepherd's paws sank into mud where frost had melted overnight. Then, suddenly, Ash stopped. His ears pricked, his body rigid. A low growl rippled from his chest, quiet, uncertain. Ethan knelt beside him, fingers brushing the dog's fur. "What is it, boy?" Ash began to dig, flinging clumps of earth and damp pine needles aside. Ethan leaned closer, catching the metallic glint of something buried beneath the soil. A small, round object emerged, a brass compass, dulled by age, its lid scratched but intact. He wiped it clean with his thumb. The engraving on its back stopped, his breath cold. "To Dad, love Ben." For a moment, the forest disappeared. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the morning birds. His hand trembled slightly as he turned the compass over, watching the needle twitch north and settle, steady and still. He couldn't move. It wasn't possible the compass had been buried with Ben's belongings after the crash. He remembered that day with the clarity of a wound. The rescue workers, the broken windshield, the smell of gasoline and rain. He had dropped the compass into the coffin himself, closing the lid with hands that refused to shake. Now it lay here, damp with earth, resting in his palm, as if time had folded back on itself. "Ben," he whispered, his voice cracking around the name. Ash pressed closer, nudging his hand, sensing the ache he could not name. Ethan stood slowly, eyes scanning the trees. Something felt wrong, off balance. The woods were too still now, as if listening. He pocketed the compass, its cold metal pressing against his thigh. Then Ash gave a short, sharp bark and took off toward the clearing beyond the ridge. "Ash, wait!" Ethan followed, boots slipping in the mud. When he reached the edge of the clearing, he saw them. Tire tracks, 2 deep grooves carved into the wet ground, fresh. They curved toward the north slope where the old mining road began, the one that hadn't been used in decades. The prints ended abruptly at the foot of a pine trunk, as if the vehicle had vanished into thin air. He crouched, touching the ruts with 2 fingers. The mud was soft, still glistening with water. Someone had been here within the hour. He followed the tracks with his eyes and noticed a piece of fabric tangled on a low branch. A dark strip of canvas, frayed at the edge, still damp. He tugged it free, holding it up to the light. It smelled faintly of oil and smoke. Whoever had been out here wasn't lost. They were hiding something. He looked down at Ash, who was staring north, tail low, silent now. "Yeah," Ethan muttered under his breath. "I feel it too." A gust swept through the trees, bending the tops of the pines until they whispered. The air shifted. The smell of wet soil turned sharp, almost metallic. Ethan's instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive in deserts and jungles, tightened like a wire in his chest. Something had moved through this forest recently. He could almost sense its weight, its purpose. For years he had told himself he no longer cared about mysteries, that ghosts should stay buried. But standing there, compass in his pocket, the earth still trembling faintly beneath his boots, he realized that someone was calling him back into the world. Ash nudged his leg, a low whine rumbling in his throat. Ethan knelt, resting a hand on the dog's back. "Easy, buddy," he said softly. His gaze drifted beyond the trees, to the thin veil of fog rising over the northern ridge. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Not hope exactly, but a direction. He closed his fingers around the compass again. Its lid was cool, its engraving rough under his thumb. The forest, once merely a refuge, now felt like a threshold. Somewhere beyond the mist, there were answers waiting about the compass, about the tracks, about the ghosts that refused to stay buried. As the sun pushed higher, turning the fog to gold, Ethan took a deep breath. The scent of pine filled his lungs, grounding him. He looked once more at the strip of canvas in his hand, then tucked it into his jacket pocket beside the compass. "Let's go home, Ash," he murmured. But even as he said it, he knew he wouldn't rest until he found out who or what had left those tracks behind. Ash barked once, sharp and certain, as if agreeing. Together they turned back toward the cabin, 2 shadows moving through the brightening forest, unaware that the day had already begun to change their fate. The next morning dawned clearer. The fog burned away by the weak sun that stretched over the town of Silver Creek. Ethan drove the dusty old Ford truck he'd inherited from his father, the tires humming low along the 2-lane road that wound toward Main Street. The compass sat in his pocket, heavy as a heartbeat. Beside him, Ash, his German shepherd, leaned against the passenger seat, head near the open window, ears flicking at every passing sound. The dog's fur shimmered silver under the light alert, disciplined, a soldier's companion, even in peace. Ethan reached over to scratch his neck absently. "Don't look at me like that," he murmured. "We're just asking questions." Ash exhaled softly, as if doubting that was ever true. The Silver Creek Museum stood at the edge of town, a brick building that had once been a post office, now weathered by years of wind and history. Inside, it smelled of old paper, cedar polish, and silence. Behind the front desk stood Dr. Lauren Harlow, the museum's curator and historian. She was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with chestnut hair tied loosely behind her head and a pair of reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her eyes were sharp, gray-green, the kind that noticed small things, scratches on metal, hesitation in a voice. She wore a wool cardigan over a faded blue dress, practical and unfussy. There was something patient about her, the patience of someone who had spent too many years listening to the past whisper through broken artifacts. Ethan waited until she looked up from a ledger before setting the compass on the glass counter between them. "You ever seen something like this?" he asked. Lauren leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek as she examined it. Her fingers, long and steady, traced the faint engraving. "Where did you find this?" she asked, tone calm but eyes narrowing. "Buried out by the North Ridge," Ethan replied. "My dog dug it up." "You recognize the mark?" She flipped open a reference book from beneath the counter and turned it toward him. A faded image of an ancient Washoe medallion filled the page, bearing the same carved wolf head facing north. "This symbol," she said, tapping the page, "was used by the Washoe tribe hundreds of years ago. They called it the Pathfinder Spirit. It marked the resting places of tribal leaders who guided souls after death. If it's real, this compass doesn't belong in the dirt. It belongs in history." Ethan frowned, his jaw tightening. History's got enough ghosts already. Lauren looked at him then, studying the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You were military, weren't you?" she asked quietly. "Marines," he said. "Long time ago." She nodded. "Men like you don't usually come in here with questions about old compasses. What are you really looking for?" He hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound foolish. "It was my son's," he finally said. "Or at least, it used to be. He's been gone 3 years." Lauren's expression softened, the professional edge fading into empathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "Loss leaves a scent. Some things never wash off." Before Ethan could answer, the front door swung open, and a gust of cold air followed a woman inside. She was younger than Lauren, maybe early 30s. Her dark hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. Her jacket was wrinkled, her jeans stained with travel dust, and a camera hung around her neck. Her name tag read Maya Torres. She had the restless energy of someone who didn't stay in one place long enough to let the dust settle. "Lauren," she said briskly, "you still keeping secrets from the living, or is today's ghost story for sale?" Her voice carried humor, but also exhaustion, the kind of tired that came from chasing truth too long through locked doors. Lauren sighed. "Maya, this is Ethan Cole. He found something Washoe engraving. Maybe pre-colonial." Maya leaned over the counter, eyes catching the compass. "Beautiful piece," she murmured, raising her camera halfway before Lauren stopped her. "No photos," Lauren said. "Not until we know what it is." Maya smirked. "You're worried about artifacts. I'm worried about people. Silvercore's been sniffing around again. Some say they're trying to buy up every relic from the Washoe lands. If this compass ties to their mining site, you might have just stepped into something big, Mr. Cole." Ethan met her gaze dark, sharp, probing, and replied, "Wouldn't be the first time." Outside, the low hum of an engine idled for too long. A black truck sat parked across the street, its windows tinted. From inside, a man watched through binoculars. He was broad and clean-cut, wearing a deputy's badge on his belt, Sam Ward, Silver Creek's deputy sheriff. He had known Ethan years ago, back when both of them wore uniforms, though his loyalty had always leaned toward survival more than justice. A call came through his radio. "Keep an eye on Cole," a voice ordered. "Report any contact with Harlow." Sam hesitated, rubbing the scar along his jawline, a souvenir from a night gone wrong during a drug raid years earlier. He didn't like following orders from people outside the station, but Silvercore paid well for silence. Back inside, Maya was already scribbling in her notebook. "Grant Miller runs Silvercore," she said, not looking up. "Ex-military, like you. Maybe even your old CO. Rumor is he's looking for something buried under the Washoe Range, something they called the Oro Totem. Your compass might be a map or a key." Ethan frowned. The name Grant stirred something unpleasant memories of orders that cost lives, of missions labeled as victories but felt like graves. He forced the thought down. "If that's true," he said, "he's digging in the wrong place." Lauren's gaze flicked to him. "Are you sure?" Ethan's hand brushed against the compass in his pocket. Not yet. The room grew quiet, except for the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Dust drifted through a beam of light cutting across the counter. Lauren finally said, "Ethan, if this object really connects to the Washoe sites, Silvercore won't stop. You should be careful." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Careful's never been my strong suit." Maya snapped her notebook shut. "Then, you'll fit right in around here." When Ethan stepped outside, the wind had picked up again. The black truck's engine turned over as he passed, but he didn't look back. Ash jumped into the truck bed, tail wagging once before settling down. Ethan touched the compass through his jacket pocket. It was warm now, faintly pulsing like a second heartbeat. Across the street, Sam Ward lifted his binoculars, watching Ethan's truck disappear around the corner, the reflection of morning light flashing across the glass like an unspoken warning. The afternoon sun slid low over the ridge, spilling gold through the trees as Ethan and Ash followed the narrow trail beyond the northern clearing. The air smelled of river stone and pine sap. Ash led the way, his black and white coat gleaming where the light pierced the canopy. He moved with purpose, nose low to the ground, tail swaying in tense concentration. Ethan trusted that instinct. 6 years together had made them more than man and dog. They were survivors of the same ghosts. The stream they reached was half dry, its bed cracked and scattered with old bottles and bones of driftwood. When Ash began pawing at the mud near a pile of rocks, Ethan knelt beside him, pushing aside the loose earth, until metal scraped against stone. Beneath the dirt lay a small iron box, scorched and rusted along its hinges. He pried it open carefully with his knife. Inside, wrapped in a fragment of oilcloth, was a charred piece of parchment, its surface brittle, but the markings still visible. The lines formed a crude map of Silver Creek's mountain basin, marked with a symbol of a wolf's head and 3 letters, O-R-O. Ethan traced them with a finger. "Oro," he muttered, the word tasting like dust. The edges of the map had dark stains, burn marks, as though someone had tried to destroy it and failed. Ash tilted his head, whining softly. "Yeah, boy," Ethan said. "Someone didn't want this found." He folded the map carefully and slid it into the pocket of his flannel shirt. That evening, the old museum lights flickered as Lauren Harlow leaned over her desk, examining the recovered parchment beneath a magnifier. The faint ink shimmered under the lamplight. "It's a mix of Latin and Washoe script," she murmured. Her brow furrowed as she read the small inscription etched along the bottom. "Qui quaerit excitabit dormientem," she translated aloud. "It means, he who seeks shall awaken what sleeps." She looked up at Ethan. "That's not a warning from history. It's a promise." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Or a threat." Lauren nodded slowly. "Either way, your compass and this map aren't random finds. They're pieces of something someone wanted buried." Before Ethan could reply, the door creaked open, and a tall man in a brown sheriff's jacket stepped inside. Daniel Reed, in his early 30s, had the quiet presence of someone used to reading rooms before speaking. He was clean-shaven, with close-cropped blonde hair and a small scar above his left eyebrow, an old injury from a rescue mission gone wrong during his early years on the force. His eyes were the color of slate, calm but never still. "Lauren," he said, tipping his hat slightly, "I got your message." "You said it was urgent." Lauren handed him the photo she had just taken of the map. "You ever seen anything like this near the old Silvercore site?" Daniel studied it, his expression darkening. "There's been talk. Last month, a Silvercore engineer went missing up near the mining tunnels, found traces of detonator caps and military-grade explosives. It didn't look like an accident." He looked at Ethan. "You used to serve under Grant Miller, didn't you?" Ethan's eyes flickered. "A lifetime ago." Daniel nodded grimly. "Then you'll want to hear this. I just got a message from someone claiming to be Grant's sister. Name's Evelyn Miller. She wants to meet off the record. Says she has evidence about the fire that destroyed the North Mine." Lauren stiffened. That fire killed half the recovery crew, including my father. Daniel's tone softened. She knows. That's why she's coming forward now. Ethan exchanged a look with Lauren, something between suspicion and curiosity. Where? He asked. Old cabin by Silver Creek Road. She'll be there by sundown. By the time they reached the cabin, the forest had begun to darken. It was a small structure, half-rotted, its roof sagging under moss. The windows were boarded except for one, through which a sliver of lantern light spilled. Ethan stepped first, hand on the grip of his pistol. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and fear. A woman sat near the table, her hands clasped tight around a folder. Evelyn Miller, early 40s, had the sharp elegance of someone who had once been part of the corporate world but had lived too long with regret. Her hair, once golden, was now streaked with silver, and her dark green eyes darted between them warily. Her clothes were plain, a gray sweater and worn jeans, but her voice was steady. "I thought no one would come," she said quietly. "After what happened, I stopped trusting anyone." Lauren stepped closer. "You worked for Silvercore." Evelyn nodded. "I was part of the engineering division. I designed containment systems for their chemical storage. When Grant took over the project, he ignored safety protocols. The explosion at the mine wasn't an INEO accident, it was deliberate. He ordered the detonation to cover a toxic spill that would have shut down the company permanently. He blamed the crew, called it sabotage. But the truth was, her voice cracked slightly, he killed them to save himself. Lauren's face went pale. My father was in that crew. Evelyn's eyes filled with guilt. "I know. I tried to warn him. I was too late." Before anyone could speak again, Ash growled low from the doorway. Ethan turned sharply, motioning for silence. From outside came the faint crunch of gravel, the sound of footsteps circling the cabin. Maya's voice whispered over the radio from the truck outside. "Ethan, you might want to hurry. Someone planted something under the vehicle." Ethan's stomach dropped. "A tracker?" Maya's voice came again, tense. "No, a locator beacon. You've got company." He looked out the window just in time to see a pair of headlights flash through the trees, then vanish. Whoever he'd been watching them, was already gone. Evelyn gripped the folder tighter, pushing it toward Ethan. Inside are copies of Silvercore's internal memos, proof Grant authorized the burn order. "If you want the truth, this is where you start." Ethan took it, his expression unreadable. "And if he knows you have this?" She smiled sadly. "Then I don't have much time left." Lauren's gaze softened, but her voice was firm. "We'll protect you." Evelyn shook her head. "You can't protect what's already marked." Outside, Ash barked once short, sharp. A signal Ethan knew well. Someone had been closer than they thought. Ethan looked to Daniel. "Get her out of here." Daniel nodded, drawing his sidearm as he scanned the tree line. Lauren turned off the lantern, plunging the cabin into shadows. For a long moment, only the sound of water from the creek could be heard, steady, cold, and endless. By nightfall, the forest around Silver Creek had changed. The wind carried a scent of oil and smoke, faint but undeniable. Ethan's truck rolled to a stop at the ridge, headlights dimmed. The darkness was alive with movement, shadows weaving through the trees, flashes of light from headlamps cutting across the branches. Ash, the German shepherd, stood alert in the truck bed, his ears stiff, a low growl rumbling deep in his throat. "Easy, boy," Ethan whispered, sliding the rifle from behind the seat. His voice was low, calm, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed him. Beside him, Lauren Harlow adjusted the strap of her leather satchel, where she had hidden Evelyn's folder. Her eyes, usually clear and composed, now carried the tight focus of someone who understood that knowledge could be as deadly as a bullet. They followed the light downhill, moving silently through the brush. At the base of the slope, the forest opened into a clearing, and that was where they saw it, a team of armed men, 6 or 7 in total, wearing tactical gear marked with the Silvercore insignia. The leader stood apart, tall, shoulders squared, his gray hair glinting in the lantern glow. Grant Miller. Time had sharpened him. His face was lean, tanned, lined by years of war and boardrooms. The air of command still clung to him, every gesture clipped, every word deliberate. "Set the charges evenly," he ordered, voice steady as if orchestrating a routine drill. "We bury this site before dawn." Ethan's stomach twisted at the sound. He remembered that tone, the same voice that once sent young soldiers into hell. Lauren's whisper brushed his ear. "He's destroying the evidence." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's finishing what he started." He stepped forward before his mind could stop him. "Miller!" The shout cut through the trees like a gunshot. Grant turned slowly, recognition flickering across his face, followed by something like amusement. "Cole," he said, his voice low but carrying. "Didn't expect to see you crawling out of the dirt." Ethan raised his rifle but didn't aim it. "You burned men alive once. You gonna do it again?" Grant smiled thinly. "Always were sentimental. That's why you follow dogs instead of orders." Behind him, one of his men, Hale, a burly enforcer with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped forward, his rifle raised. "You want me to handle this, sir?" Grant didn't answer. He just looked at Ethan and said, "Walk away, Cole. There's nothing here but ghosts." The silence shattered as Hale's gun barked. The bullet tore into the tree beside Ethan's head and chaos erupted. Lauren ducked behind a log, clutching the satchel, while Ash lunged forward, teeth bared, barking in furious warning. Ethan fired back, driving the mercenaries to cover. The forest lit up with muzzle flashes, the sound deafening. Then, with a roar that felt alive, one of the explosives detonated, prematurely. Fire spilled outward like a wave, devouring branches, igniting pine sap in sizzling bursts. The world turned orange and black. Ethan grabbed Lauren's arm, pulling her into the narrow crevice of a rocky gulch. Ash followed, pressing close, his fur singed at the tips. The heat clawed at them, the smell of burning wood thick enough to choke on. From a distance, Maya Torres crouched behind a fallen tree, camera steady, despite the tremor in her hands. The light from the flames flickered across her face, sweat streaking down her temple. Through the lens, she captured everything: the Silver Corps insignia, the detonations. Grant's face lit in the firelight like some god of ruin. "Got you," she whispered, pressing record. Her mind flashed back to every exposé she'd written that no one believed. This time, she thought, the world would see. Behind her, Ash barked, the sound sharp, desperate. At the same time, in town, Deputy Sam Ward stood outside the sheriff's office, radio pressed to his ear. The voice that crackled through was Grant's. "Contain Reed. No interference." Sam's hand trembled around the mic. He knew that voice too well, the one that had promised favors and delivered threats. Across from him, Daniel Reed was strapping on his bulletproof vest, eyes fierce with purpose. "I'm going," Daniel said. "They're burning the forest, Sam. You hear me? There are people out there." Sam stepped in his path. "Orders are to stand down." "Orders?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "You think this is about orders? It's murder." Sam's jaw flexed. He looked torn, like a man caught between duty and fear. "You don't understand, Reed. They'll bury us both if we get in the way." Daniel shoved past him. "Then let them try." Back in the burning woods, another explosion ripped through the clearing. Ethan shielded Lauren as a rain of burning debris cascaded around them. His rifle was gone, buried under rock. He heard Grant shouting commands through the smoke, ordering a retreat. The mercenaries scattered, some carrying crates, others dragging wounded men. The heat pressed in like a living thing, sucking the oxygen from the air. Ethan staggered to his feet, coughing. Ash barked again, frantic this time, and darted toward the open ground. "Ash." Ethan called, but the dog had seen something. Through the smoke, a faint outline appeared. A small figure standing still, amid the haze, the shape of a child. The boy turned slightly, the firelight glinting off something in his hand. Ethan froze. The compass. His heart slammed in his chest. Ben. The name tore out before he could stop it. The figure lifted one arm, pointing toward the northern ridge toward the mountains. Then, just as the flames surged, the boy vanished into the smoke. Lauren grabbed his sleeve. "Ethan, we have to move!" The hillside groaned as another charge detonated, the earth shaking beneath their feet. Ash lunged forward, grabbing Ethan's flannel with his teeth, dragging him clear as a burning tree crashed where he'd been standing. For a second, the world went white. When the sound faded, the forest was a sea of embers. The mercenaries were gone. Grant's voice had vanished with them. Ethan lay on his back, breathing hard, staring at the blackened sky. The compass in his pocket was hot, almost burning. Beside him, Ash whimpered, smoke curling from his fur. Lauren knelt, coughing, her face streaked with soot but alive. "Ethan," she whispered hoarsely. "Did you see someone?" He didn't answer. He just stared north, where the ridge still glowed faintly red. By dawn, the fires had died down, leaving behind a wasteland of ash and twisted pine. The smoke clung to the mountains like a memory that refused to fade. Ethan stood on the ridge, his flannel jacket scorched at the sleeve, the compass heavy in his pocket. Ash, the black and white German shepherd, limped beside him, his fur still singed from the night before, but his eyes bright, unbroken. Behind them, Lauren Harlow climbed the slope, her face pale with exhaustion but her grip on Evelyn's map steady. She pointed toward the northern range where mist rolled down the cliffs like a silver curtain. "There," she said. "That's where the Washoe carved the Gate of Spirits." Ethan nodded. "Then that's where this ends." The drive north took hours along a dirt road lined with the remnants of old logging trails. Daniel Reed, his arm bound in a makeshift sling, sat behind the wheel of his Jeep, jaw clenched against the pain. He refused to let anyone else drive. Control, for him, was a kind of penance. He had always been the sort of man who needed to be doing something to fix, to protect, to act. Ever since that failed rescue, years ago when 2 of his men died under his command. "If Grant's after this cave," he said, voice rough, "he's not looking for redemption. He's looking for power." Lauren glanced out the window, murmuring, "And power always asks for blood." By noon, they reached the base of the ridge. The entrance loomed ahead, a narrow fissure in the stone, framed by carvings worn smooth by centuries of rain. Ethan brushed his fingers over the symbol at the archway, a wolf's head facing upward, its eyes cut into the rock so that sunlight shone through them. Lauren whispered, almost reverently, "The Silver Wolf Cave." The Washoe believed it was the passage between worlds where the spirit that guards memory sleeps. Evelyn, standing a few steps back, pulled her jacket tight. She looked older now, her face lined with guilt and sleepless nights. "Grant thinks the spirit can cleanse the ground," she said. "He's wrong. The ritual is a warning, not salvation." Ethan turned to her. "You've seen the files?" "I helped write them," she admitted. "They were never about healing the earth. They were about controlling it." They stepped into the cave. The air grew cold, wet with the scent of stone and moss. Their flashlight beams danced along the walls, revealing ancient petroglyphs, wolves, circling flames, men kneeling before a great shadow. At the far end stood a massive stone slab, carved with symbols, spiraling inward, leading to a depiction of a wolf engulfed in light. Lauren traced the lines with her fingers, awe in her voice. "This shows the awakening, the merging of spirit and sacrifice." Daniel adjusted his grip on his sidearm. "Or maybe it's just a warning to stay the hell out." His words echoed through the cavern like a bad omen. Suddenly, a distant rumble rolled through the mountain. Evelyn froze. "He's here." From the cave mouth, the faint hum of engines grew louder trucks. Within moments, shadows flickered across the entrance as Grant Miller appeared, flanked by 4 armed men. His face was streaked with soot from the forest fire, but his posture remained perfectly composed. "You led me right to it," he said coolly. "You always were dependable, Cole." Ethan raised his rifle. "You're not getting this," Grant smirked. "I already have it." He nodded to his men. A burst of gunfire tore through the air, stone splintering, dust exploding around them. Ethan pulled Lauren behind a boulder, returning fire. The echoes turned the cave into a thunder chamber. Daniel crouched near the wall, firing short, measured bursts until a bullet grazed his shoulder. "I'm hit," he grunted, sliding down, blood darkening his sleeve. Maya, her camera slung over her neck, tried to back away toward cover, but a stray bullet shattered the lens, scattering glass across the floor. "No, no, damn it," she hissed. Evelyn screamed as one of Grant's men tackled her, wrenching the map from her hands. Ash lunged, teeth bared, knocking the man down, but a falling rock struck his hind leg, pinning him. The dog yelped in pain. "Ash!" Ethan roared, trying to reach him, but the crossfire pinned him in place. Grant moved forward slowly, almost reverently, his boots crunching over debris. "The Washoe believed blood opened the gate," he said. "Seems fitting, doesn't it? That it's yours." He aimed his pistol at Ethan. Before he could fire, Lauren hurled a smoke grenade from Daniel's belt. The cave filled with white haze, choking visibility. "Move!" Ethan shouted. He grabbed Lauren's hand and pulled her toward the inner tunnel. The air burned his lungs, the sound of chaos echoing behind them, shouts, gunfire, the desperate barking of Ash. The last thing he saw before the smoke swallowed everything was Grant, standing before the carved wolf, eyes shining with something between faith and madness. Ethan and Lauren stumbled through a side passage, choking on dust. The ground trembled. Another explosion rocked the cave, sending shards of stone cascading from the ceiling. They emerged into a smaller chamber lit by a shaft of sunlight from above. Ethan leaned against the wall, gasping. "We're not done," he said, his voice hoarse. Lauren nodded, clutching the satchel tight. Behind them, the mountain growled alive, furious. The storm rolled over the mountains just as night fell, thunder echoing through the forest like the heartbeat of something ancient. The entrance to the Silver Wolf Cave was half collapsed from the earlier blasts, smoke and dust still lingering in the air. Grant Miller stood before the shattered carvings, rain streaking down his soot-covered face, eyes burning with a kind of feverish devotion. His once pristine uniform was torn, his sleeves blackened by gunpowder, but the authority in his posture remained unbroken. In front of him knelt Evelyn Miller, her wrists bound, hair matted with dirt and rain. "You think this place will forgive you?" she rasped. Grant crouched down, his voice calm but distant. "Forgiveness isn't what I came for. Power doesn't need forgiveness." He motioned to his remaining soldiers, 3 hardened men, all scarred and silent, to lead her deeper into the cave toward the towering stone totem carved with the image of a wolf. Outside, Ethan Cole and Lauren Harlow crouched beneath the cover of the ridge, wind tearing at their clothes. Ash, the German shepherd, limped beside them, muzzle wrapped in cloth to keep him from whining. His fur was still marked with streaks of ash and mud, but his eyes burned fiercely in the dark. Ethan scanned the slope through his binoculars. "He's got Evelyn," he muttered. "He's taking her to the totem chamber." Lauren checked the detonator in her hand, its red light blinking faintly. "If the map's right, there's still a secondary tunnel beneath the north wall. We can reach them before he triggers anything." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't say it, but the thought of leaving Evelyn, of letting Grant finish what he started, wasn't something he could live with. They slipped into the tunnel through a fissure in the rock, crawling through a labyrinth of narrow passages where every sound seemed amplified. The drip of water, the grind of stone, the distant rumble of the storm. As they neared the main chamber, Lauren saw the totem first. A colossal stone wolf rising from the cavern floor, its surface inlaid with fragments of silver and obsidian that shimmered faintly in the lantern light. Before it stood Grant and Evelyn, surrounded by soldiers, their flashlights cutting sharp white beams through the gloom. Grant's voice echoed, cold and fervent. For decades they buried the truth beneath their science. Silver core didn't poison the land rejected us. The Washoe knew it. They called it Oro, the sleeping guardian. I will wake it, and it will cleanse everything they took. Evelyn struggled against her restraints. You'll kill us all. Then we'll die purified, he said simply, placing his hand on the totem. Ethan emerged from the shadows like a phantom, rifle raised. Step away, Grant. The ex-commander turned slowly, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I thought I buried you years ago, Cole. You almost did, Ethan replied, when you buried my team under your lies. Grant's eyes flickered, but he didn't lower his hand. The only difference between us, Marine, is that I made peace with what I've done. No, Ethan said quietly. You just stopped feeling it. Suddenly, one of the soldiers fired. The bullet sparked against the stone near Ethan's head, forcing him and Lauren to dive for cover. Ash lunged forward, biting down on the shooter's arm, and chaos erupted. Ethan fired back, dropping 2 men before they could reload. In the confusion, Lauren crawled toward the totem, clutching a small pack of reflective explosives she'd salvaged from the Silver Core truck. Ethan, she shouted. The totem, it's lined with conductive ore. If I trigger the reaction, the chain charge will travel through the walls. Do it, he called back. Lauren pressed the detonator. A burst of blue-white light surged through the cavern like a living current, racing along the veins of silver embedded in the rock. The totem began to hum, low and resonant, as if the mountain itself were breathing. Evelyn screamed as the air thickened, the ground trembling beneath them. The carvings on the walls glowed, and from within the totem's chest, a pulse of light exploded outward. In its radiance, a shape began to form a vast wolf of silver flame, translucent, yet solid, its eyes bright as stars. The spirit of Oro, the guardian of the Washoe, had awakened. Grant, half blinded by the brilliance, lifted his weapon and fired at the apparition. The bullets vanished into the light, swallowed whole. He screamed, firing again and again, until the totem's glow intensified, engulfing him and his men in a wave of molten silver. For a heartbeat, his voice echoed through the chamber, a single, wordless cry before it was gone. The light collapsed inward, and the mountain shuddered. Rocks split from the ceiling. Run! Ethan grabbed Evelyn and Lauren, dragging them toward the exit. Ash barked furiously, following close, his paw slipping on the slick ground. They dove through the tunnel as the cave began to fall in behind them. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, the forest eerily still. The mountain groaned once, then went silent. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping for breath. Beside him, Ash whimpered softly, head resting against his knee. Lauren clutched the compass in her hand, now faintly glowing with the same silver light that had consumed the cave. The needle trembled, then settled, pointing north. Ethan stared at it, whispering, "He's gone." Lauren looked toward the horizon. "Maybe not everything," she said. The wind carried away the last echo of the storm, leaving only the whisper of the trees. The morning came soft and golden over the rebuilt valley. Mist hung low across the trees, curling like smoke over the charred stumps that had once marked the edge of the Silver Core site. A year had passed since the fire, and yet the land was no longer dead, it was alive again. Wild grass pushed through the ash, wildflowers clung to the soil, and the steady hum of life had returned to the forest. At the center of it all stood a small wooden building with a faded sign above the porch, Silver Heart, Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. Ethan Cole stepped out onto the porch, the boards creaking under his boots. His red and black flannel was sun-worn now, the color faded but still unmistakable. His beard had grown fuller, streaked with gray, and there was a quiet peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Ash, his black and white German shepherd, lay stretched across the wooden planks, muzzle resting on his paws. The dog's fur had grown back thicker, the scar on his hind leg nearly invisible. When Ethan scratched behind his ear, Ash thumped his tail once, slow and content. Inside, Lauren Harlow arranged medical supplies along a counter. Her hair, tied back in a loose braid, caught the light spilling through the window. She had swapped her old leather satchel for a canvas apron covered in notes and paw prints. A botanist turned healer, she had found new purpose tending to wounded strays and orphaned wildlife. "You know," she said with a faint smile, "we've treated more people than animals this month." Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "Maybe people finally figured out this place isn't cursed. Or maybe," she replied softly, "it finally forgave us." At a nearby desk, Maya Torres typed furiously on her laptop. Her dark curls framed a face still marked by faint scars from that night, though she wore them proudly now. The banner of her published article hung on the wall above her, "The Spirits of Washoe, the Truth, Beneath the Silver Mines." She had become something of a folk hero among environmental journalists, the woman who exposed the lies of Silver Core. Yet her voice, when she spoke, remained grounded. "The last batch of donation letters came in this morning," she said, turning to Ethan. "People are calling this a miracle. You okay with that label?" Ethan gave a small chuckle. "I'm fine as long as they don't call it divine intervention. I've seen enough of that kind of light for a lifetime." The screen door creaked open, and Daniel Reed walked in, wearing a sheriff's jacket without the badge. The once stoic officer now carried a calmer air, his arm still bearing a faint scar where the bullet had grazed him in the cave. He had returned to Silver Creek not as a lawman, but as a protector in a different sense, the center's security head and unofficial handyman. "Morning, boss," he said. "Got word the first wolf we released last spring's been spotted near the ridge. She's got pups." Ethan smiled. "Then I guess we did something right." A familiar pickup pulled up along the dirt path. Out stepped Sam Ward, no longer wearing his deputy uniform. He looked thinner, beard grown out, a weariness in his face that wasn't from age, but from guilt, slowly turning into grace. "Didn't think you'd actually show," Daniel said, crossing his arms. Sam nodded quietly. "Didn't think I'd be welcome." Ethan walked down from the porch, hand extended. "You weren't. Not then. But people change." Sam hesitated, then shook his hand. "Heard the state's turning the burn site into a memorial park," he said. "Evelyn's been helping coordinate it." Lauren joined them, nodding. "She comes by sometimes. Plants trees for every life lost. Says it helps her sleep." The group fell into silence for a while, watching the sun climb over the ridge. The mountain shimmered faintly in the distance, the place where the Silver Wolf Cave had once stood before the collapse. No one went there now. Yet every dawn, a silver mist would drift down from that direction, glimmering in the first light. Maya, standing beside Ash, whispered, "Do you think it's real? The spirit?" Ethan looked toward the forest, where the mist caught the sunlight, and for an instant looked alive, a long, elegant shape moving between the trees. He smiled faintly. "Maybe it's not supposed to be real. Maybe it's just a reminder." He knelt beside Ash, pulling the old compass from his pocket. The metal was dull, the engraving still clear. "To Dad, love Ben." He turned it in his hand until the needle settled, pointing north toward the ridge. His voice was low but sure. "Ben, you showed me the way," he whispered. "Now it's my turn to guide others." Lauren rested a hand on his shoulder, and for a moment, no one spoke. The wind brushed through the pines, carrying with it the faint echo of a howl, distant, gentle, eternal. Ash lifted his head, eyes fixed on the forest as a thin streak of silver light flickered between the trees. The others followed his gaze, none daring to speak. Then, slowly, Ethan rose, slipped the compass into his pocket, and whispered, "Let's get back to work." Behind him, the morning sun broke fully over Silver Creek, warm and gold, painting the valley in peace. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, through the loyalty of a dog, the courage of a broken man, or the grace that lets a wounded soul begin again. In the ashes of loss, God plants seeds of renewal. In every act of kindness, His light flickers through. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little faith today. Leave a comment, subscribe, and help us keep telling stories of love, redemption, and hope. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide you through every dark forest toward His dawn. Because even in silence, even in sorrow, His miracles never stop. They're waiting for those who still believe.